Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hello, universe. When the world was closing down and we were isolating, as travel became restricted and resources felt limited, we felt our borders more than ever. But a place where we broke boundaries was connecting with other humans online all over the globe. One of my treasures from this period of pandemic life has been all the new friendships I have made. One day back in October, a beautiful soul popped into my DMs. Of course, we stalked each other's feeds and had so much mutual admiration. We decided to call each other on the phone, and 2 hours later, I was moved by her spirit, by her purpose, by her passion. In fact, I looked back at my journal from that night and I'd written the following: what if we saw souls instead of bodies? What would be beautiful to us? Let me say that again. What if we saw souls instead of bodies? What would be beautiful to
Wow.
us? You see, this woman's life's purpose and story stirred me, like stirred my soul, actually. She has 2 degrees, one in psychology, one in management. In fact, she turned down a full ride to Harvard and left the corporate world to pursue her life's calling. You know, that little gnawing voice that wouldn't go away for her, that told her she should learn to play big and to teach others to do the same, to not let others diminish their worth, no matter the obstacle, no matter the self talk that sometimes society puts on those that they other. She's a champion for inclusivity. I'm talking to the ever inspiring Maria Thattil. Now, you may already know her as Miss Universe Australia, and as we record this on the eve of her departure to Florida to compete in the finals of the Global Miss Universe pageant, I think what makes her so unique is that Maria's pursuit of the crown is not one in where she's looking for affirmation of her undeniable physical beauty, but one in which she hopes to inspire the world to re-examine and redefine what real beauty is. At 27, she's already has a multi-hyphenated career, applying her degrees in psychology and management to a portfolio of projects where she champions social justice causes. She's a writer, a speaker, a creator, and currently studying to be an international life coach. Please meet my friend, Miss Universe Australia, and in my opinion, soon to be Miss Universe, Maria Thattil.
Oh my goodness. What do I say to that intro?
You say hello because
Oh,
this universe.
sitting here just thinking, I'm blown away by your, that was so generous. That was so generous. Thank you. Oh, and beat me, and
Thank
my
you.
cheeks hurt from smiling.
It is you. It
Oh,
is true. And it is honest. And I'm so happy to have you on this show and so honored that you're speaking to us on the eve of your big moment. I mean,
oh.
what's it like though, preparing to leave from Australia to Florida to compete in the Miss Universe pageant? Like, what are you feeling? What's happening?
I don't even know where to begin. Firstly, I just want to start by saying thank you so much for holding a space for me on your show. I'm privileged. I think I relate to and respect a lot of your viewers and the people who are tuning in. They're a lot of the people that I hope to reach. So I'm very, very grateful for the space and to talk to you, because when we first connected, we just, as you said, we vibed. We just vibed. And I think right now it is the most exciting period in my life. I can't even stop smiling. And I think I, very surprisingly to myself, I'm not feeling anxious. I'm not feeling nervous. I'm feeling ready. And I'm really excited to get there. I know that in the past, I've been involved in the Miss Universe program in some capacity since October 2019, when I was just a state finalist in the national level. And the preparation and the transformation that has gone into getting ready to, put myself on a global stage and say, I think I could be an international voice for a lot of people. There's quite a lot of work that goes into it. And I'm very proud to say I don't think I've left a stone unturned. And I know I'm representing myself as honestly and fully as I can. So whether it goes the way I hope or not, I know I've done my best, and I just want to get there and have that moment and say what I've been dying to say to the world since I was a young girl. So I'm very excited.
Well, I always tell my son before he goes to bed that preparation breeds champions. And just hearing you say you have left no stone unturned, I'm not surprised at all. Um, I want you to paint the picture for us though, because this isn't just any Miss Universe. You are going in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. So how is that different than past years? Can you bring your team? Can you bring your loving family? Like what's happening?
It's very different, Alex. And you know, even at the national level, I have never done anything like this before. I'll start by saying that. Had only started modeling and dabbling in that at the end of 2019. So very new to this world, but very comfortable. And once you know you follow the breadcrumbs and you just end up where you end up, you're good, right? But the Miss Universe pageant itself, from being a national finalist in March, Australia went into lockdown immediately after. So I was in lockdown for 8 months. My state was locked down for the longest period relative to all the other states. So it's very difficult to compete because you're watching all the other finalists in other states be able to access gyms and grooming. And I wasn't allowed to leave my home for more than 1 hour a day within a 5 kilometer radius. So
Wow.
it was very challenging. And in essence, I would get a box of product dropped to my house, and all I could do was make content. And that was the only thing I could do to show them, if you picked me as your Miss Universe Australia, this is what you would get. Now, the thing is, though, I think social media is a tool that can be immensely powerful if you use it correctly. And I like to think I'm digitally savvy. So I knew how to leverage it and show them, okay, you know what? I don't need events, networking, the shoots, any of that to show you how impactful I can be as a leader, because I think this role is a leadership opportunity. And I just did that. And it ended up working out. I ended up being selected in the middle of a pandemic. We had gotten out of lockdown 12 hours before the national final. So we got told the night before, you don't have to zoom in to the final, you can go and be together. So that was amazing. And then preparing has been really interesting because the international competition is so different to the national competition. It is really what you make it. Different countries put different levels of investments into it. So I've kind of just taken it and run with it. And I've grown a lot because I've had to be a creative director, a producer, a script writer, sourcing stylist, doing all of these things because I knew I'm not going to do this unless it's anything less than epic. So poured a lot of heart and soul into it. It's been a lot of hard work, but I've learned so much, I've grown so much, and it's all been very intentional. I think if you look at any of the projects, right down to what outfits I'm wearing, or you know what captions accompany my post, the message of inclusivity and championing differences, that has been an undercurrent in everything. So it's really been a mix of learning, evolving, growing, and making sure that the powerful message I'm taking to the world stage has been consistent since day one. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of it. Really
You
proud.
should be. And when you say anything less than epic, can we just please talk about your national costume? Because people, basically, if you don't remember the Miss Universe pageant, one of the
Oh,
events is that every representative has to sort of appear in an event with their national costume. And
mm,
you have unveiled your national costume ahead of time
yes.
on Australian TV, which the power of YouTube I have seen. But I want you, for the radio audience, to be able to
Yeah.
describe this costume and what it represents.
Yeah. And I'd be thrilled to. And I think, let me start by saying, with Australia, you talk about a national costume. What is a country's national identity, right? Australia
Mhm.
is a country that is built on immigration, but it's actually on First Nations soil. And a lot of people don't know about our Indigenous roots, and they have post colonial ideas about what our country is. So, our national identity is a bit of a mix of things. And I, as a non Indigenous Australian woman, cannot represent Indigenous culture in a way that could be seen as appropriating. I want to honor that. But I think what I can represent as an Australian woman through a national costume that talks about our identity is our values. So the costume itself is a bit of a motor, you know, masterpiece. It is modeled off the black swan. And the black swan is a native Australian bird. It's actually the emblem of Western Australia. And what it means to me and the message I'm taking is that it's a symbol of hope, because swans were thought to be invariably white up until the 16th century. And in fact, the term black swan was used to describe something that's impossible, not normal. It's outside the norm. But so much of what I'm about is challenging the norm and breaking barriers. And I think what I want to embody is what I consider to be the true Australian spirit of breaking norms to be inclusive for everyone. So, like the black swan has defied generalized assumptions, so have I about what being Australian is. And I'm taking that message as a symbol of you can overcome the impossible, you can challenge the status quo and have hope. So, that is what my costume represents. And it is something I am very honored to wear.
It's gorgeous. For those of you who are listening to this as a podcast on the radio, I urge you to Google it. She mentioned the motor. Not sure if you
Yeah.
caught that. Like literally, people, there's a motor in this costume.
It
So
moves.
it moves. I love that. Everyone knows I love a good robot. So this is like
Yeah.
robotic fashion. I like. But
Yeah.
speaking of costumes, speaking of feeling the way that you do, it all started. I was really, when I was digging into your history and learning about you and in our conversation, something that you said really struck me, which was when you were younger, you basically, in essence, had another type of costume on, one that was trying to sort of hide your authenticity. And I think what's so remarkable to me about your story and what you represent is where your story starts. So let's start with, first of all, your adorable parents. Hello. First of all, your mom is Bengali. I'm not Bengali,
Yes,
but
she
I totally
is.
now understand your cute eyes because you and your mom are
Oh,
like twins. She's so stunning.
she's
Auntie,
beautiful.
if you
So
are
I'm
listening, you are like the most stunning woman.
I love that she will be listening. She's always the first one to listen. So, Mum, you heard it here first. Everybody thinks you're an icon. You're amazing.
Yes, you are. And your adorable dad, who is your sidekick in many of your videos, who
Yeah,
is from Kerala, which I totally love. So you are a Desi girl like me. And
100%.
yes, so let's start there. What was it like? Because you were born in Australia, right? So
Yeah.
tell us what that was like coming up in Australia as a Desi woman.
Yeah. Mum and dad, God bless them. If you guys are listening, I love you both. Mum and dad moved to Australia in the 90s. They immigrated here. And it was a very different context in Australia. Diversity and, ethnic diversity in particular, it wasn't necessarily celebrated and talked about in the way that it is today. And there was a very big lack of representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Australia. So the perception of Australia, internal and external to the country, was very Anglo-Celtic. And for that reason, when I was growing up, when I was as young as 6 years old, I started to notice that I was different, because cultural sensitivity and respect, I think it's taught more widely now. And there definitely was a lack of that when I was growing up. I often talk about this one story. I was 6 years old and I had a crush on a boy, still love the boys. Had a crush on a boy. And I remember him saying, I told my cousin to pass on the message because I was so painfully shy. And he had said, I don't like her ill. She's a monster. Her skin is dirty. And, for a 6-year-old to hear something like that and to think, oh my God, there's this thing about me that I can't change. You can try and scrub your skin. At 14, I was using skin bleaching creams and things like that, but it started very early. And when I was in my school years, it was very apparent to me when I'd go to school that I had these peers who had they abided by Western norms. Their parents were a lot more liberal. They were allowed to watch TV shows I wasn't allowed to watch. And I'd go home and my family's food, movies, clothes, the way they spoke, the way they expected me to interact with them in the world around me, it was drastically different to what my peers were, doing. And I just wanted to fit in, because the representation of people like us, South Asian people, ethnic minorities, it wasn't seen. I thought, well, that's not Australian. because I'm putting on the TV, I'm looking at the news, I'm reading magazines, and all I see is a segment of the population that is not me. So into my teen years, I actually started to completely denounce my ethnic heritage. And I was so ashamed of the South Asian part of me that I stopped wanting to eat Indian food. I stopped speaking to my extended family, my cousins, refused to watch Indian movies. I wore my last, cultural garments at 14 and started wearing makeup that was about 4 shades too white, also because there was no makeup available for people of color here, green eye contacts. And when you look at it, you see that I was just trying to occupy skin that wasn't mine because that's what I thought I needed to do to be Australian. And when there was racist jokes in school by my peers and they would say things, the representation we had was like a Pooh in The Simpsons, which is really derogatory racial stereotypes that are enforced. So I would get asked, do your parents wear the red dot? And, oh, do they all work in a 7-Eleven? And does everybody bob their head when they talk? And it's, for one, working in a 7-Eleven or as a taxi driver or any of the things I was told, for people to firstly speak about those occupations like they were something to be looked down upon, when that is people trying to earn an honest living, that's extremely disappointing and not something I would encourage at all. But also, just the insensitivity and the blanketing of generalizations to an entire group of people. However, I know now it's just a lack of awareness. People didn't see South Asian people, they saw very limited representation and they thought that's what everyone must be like. But in fact, I used to get Black jokes too, because understanding that racism and, the differences between Black, Indigenous, and people of color, they didn't understand the nuances. So everybody was just lumped together. And it was a really tough time growing up for not just me, but people like me and also people not like me who were, further down the spectrum. And I think anybody who was different, you did feel foreign and you did feel othered. And even today, even though things are getting better, I, on a weekly basis, can promise you that I am asked by strangers, where are you from? And when I tell them Australia, they say, no, where are you really from? Like, I've never been anywhere else. Australia is my home. And if you unpack it and you ask somebody, what makes you make the assumption that I'm not from here? It is looking at someone through a lens of race. And that is something that I've seen all throughout my life. And whilst it's getting more subtle, microaggressions, they still exist. But back to my story, it was very tough growing up and I completely denounced my South Asian heritage. I changed the way I looked. I was ashamed of who I was. And it was this complete cultural identity crisis because I didn't feel Indian enough to be Indian. I didn't feel Australian enough to be Australian. And I was constantly switching up things about myself to fit in wherever I was. So I think it's a very sad thing when I reflect on it, for anybody to feel like in order to belong, they need to give up parts of themselves. And it did lead to a period of mental health issues and a lot of anger and a bit of resentment in my early 20s when I started to realize what was going on. And I started to think, why have I been doing this? And I started to unlearn that. And then I started to take pride in my background. But then I'd be angry that I, neglected it for so long. It was really, it's like you go through stages of grief. It's, you are angry, then you're sad, then you resist it. And it took a long time to heal, to now be in the position I am where I can educate on my experiences from a place of love and wanting to, counter ignorance with unifying perspectives. But I had to get past a lot of heavy emotions and hurt as somebody who felt like I don't belong because of my race. So yeah, it's quite challenging. It was challenging, but yeah.
Your story of not feeling like you belonged, it's obviously one that even to some extent I can sort of relate to growing up in the US when I was younger. But I think it's one that anybody anywhere of any race can understand because everyone
Yes.
is othered in some way. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think in that way it's super universal. But I'm
Yeah.
wondering for you, like, what was that turning point? Because you describe it as, you sort of like were becoming depressed, understandably so.
So I think when I think about the turning point, there was no one moment as such, but I remember being in my early 20s. It was 23, 24, and I had gone back to university to do my master's in management. And at the same time, I had followed this little inkling that I wanted to do something creative, and I started doing a makeup artistry qualification. And I remember just even with that decision, there were peers at uni. I went to Melbourne Business School, and a very prestigious school. I was getting first class honors in my assignments and things like that. And I remember telling my peers, I'm going to go do a makeup qualification. And people kind of looked down their nose at me and said, are you going to be one of those makeup girls on social media? And there was so much judgment there. But I remember pushing through that and thinking, if I don't do this, because social media was starting to become a real thing back then, I was watching other people live that dream. And I thought, I don't want to go years down the line. And yes, I have this amazing corporate career, but I'm going to look at other people doing what they love. And I'm going to sit here being full of regret. So despite the judgment, I did it anyway. And I think breaking past that and feeling so fulfilled doing the creative thing that I wanted to do for so long, it started to get the wheels turning. And then I started to think a little bit about music that I liked from Bollywood and wanting to listen to it and not actually be ashamed of it. Movies that I enjoyed and not feeling guilty about allowing myself to indulge that side of me. And it was slowly trickling in and thinking like, why have I hidden this? And coming to the realization that it is so beautiful. And on social media, I started speaking about my experiences, but purely from a context of beauty originally, where I would talk about, okay, hey everyone, these are my makeup tips. I haven't been able to find this foundation, so this is where I sourced to this. And all of a sudden, I started to build a community. And I realized, hang on, my lived experiences it's not a unique thing. There are so many people around the world who understand what it's like to feel othered, to not feel catered to. So all these factors, breaking through the original judgment and doing something creative, and then realizing that there was a community of people who related to me, it gave me the strength to keep pushing through and unlearn and talk about things more openly. And eventually that really helped me heal over a period of time. So I do credit my online community and my creative endeavors because that ended up being a medium that I was expressing myself through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up makeup and
Yeah.
skincare because it's such a lucrative market, and being the
Mm,
business that we are, I
yeah.
have some stats that show that currently 40% of Americans are people with skin of color, and this is estimated to grow beyond 50% by 2035.
Mm,
And globally, 80% of all people are with skin of color. Yet most of the clinical studies, research, and products on the market are not geared towards
yeah.
those with skin of color. It's interesting. We now see, because of the exact problem you faced and many other people, I have this girlfriend, Shea Perez. She has this line called Shade Beauty, where it's basically skincare. I never knew that women with melanin or men with melanin or whomever with melanin needed different type of skincare. You didn't know that. I didn't know that. And, these are all things we're all sort of learning. So to hear you talk about that, there's this wide open space of just even sharing information to people
Yeah.
out there, like, it's such an untapped, unfulfilled market, and makeup is so charged, I think, with emotion for women. When you think
Mm.
about women, I remember reading this article and study about how women who wore makeup on a daily basis to work got paid more. I find that so
It is such a complex, it is so
yes.
complex socially. It is, and there's many, oh my gosh, it's so late. I don't even know where to begin with what you've
Well,
just
let's
said because
stop and let's get into it, because for a few minutes,
yes,
because I haven't heard you talk about this, and because you started, part of your journey started with a
yeah,
pageant makeup. So,
it
and
did.
now you're on this big stage. I think we want to hear what you think about this, and how should
Yeah.
we think about this?
It's, and I'll start by saying, firstly, with makeup, and you talk about beauty being emotionally charged, as somebody who quite literally the first thing I said when I was talking about this journey was the first thing I got was judgment. And when I think about Miss Universe, for example, there's a lot of judgment within that arena too. And I think in general, women are judged based on the things they do to empower themselves. And we're inundated with mixed messages. We're told, be confident. But then if you are confident in a way that is not socially acceptable to some people, it's, well, you could be confident, but you shouldn't do it this way. Why wouldn't you do something different? And I think a lot of the time, beauty can be perceived as being vapid, and people talk about maybe pageantry as, it's, they have misperceptions about it and think it is
And
baseless and
pause.
there's no
I'm
substance.
confident that there are people listening who are judging right now. So
Oh
this
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
why I love Maria so much, because you are like literally a breath of fresh air in this space, and just really redefining the standards of pageantry and beauty and what it means. But, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no,
Keep
no,
going.
that's amazing. No, and this is the thing. Like, if you are listening, and if you are somebody who has thought, I don't understand beauty, and I think it's vain or it's vapid or pageantry is outdated and it objectifies women or whatever it is, I think you need to take a step back and maybe ask yourself, well, am I imposing my views on another woman who has and should have the agency and ability to choose what she does to empower herself? Because I think I spoke about this recently in another interview where I said, if beauty doesn't make sense to you as something that is empowering, that's absolutely fine. And it's not for everybody. But if it is an empowerment, if it's a medium for empowerment for some people, who are we to judge? And this is the whole thing about inclusion and celebrating differences. It is not imposing a set of norms, standards, and beliefs onto other people. I think it's live and let live. And if it's not hurting anybody, respect that. And you see that in so many different, I think you see it in so many different arenas. But, talking about Miss Universe, people do have misperceptions, and I understand that. But I've said it from day one that I decided to do it because I knew I was going to shake things up and I was going to redefine it and make it my own. And I think that that is a very empowering thing for a woman or women to be able to say, I've got this, and this is what works for me, and this is how I am going to step into my power. So when it comes to beauty, I think it is misunderstood. Like you said, it is emotionally charged. It has a lot of many layers of social complexity, but it was such an important starting point for me because I think it can be used as a medium to connect people, to show up as your best self, to feel good about yourself, to indulge and take care. And I think, why not? If it sparks joy, that's it. And I think it is really alarming that to this day, like you said, 80% of the population is Black, Indigenous, or people of color. But what we see represented is an entirely, different segment. And we are overrepresenting one population and completely underrepresenting another, which tells you that the industries are saying that if you belong to a certain part of the color spectrum, you are not a valued consumer. Maybe you don't think the buying power is there. Maybe you don't think that they're worth the commercial investment. But this is something, and this might be uncomfortable for people, but I believe this is a manifestation of systemic racism because we're looking at a belief system that is affecting commercial decisions, that is then affecting the level of access that certain people have to something as simple as beauty and makeup. We're telling people that you don't deserve equitable access based on the color of your skin. And it needs to change. So I don't know for how many of you are listening, but if you've seen this, but there is a national e-commerce retailer in Australia called Adore Beauty. And I was just, I've actually been the spokesperson for their Global Shades movement, where we've actually done a campaign and a petition to get people to sign to say that Global Shades should be available in Australia, because we are one of the most multicultural societies in the world, but we're catering to this much. So we've put out this petition to say that everybody deserves equal access. We need to do better. We know better. Let's do better.
I think that's wonderful. And I've heard you say this in other interviews about this in a way, this colonialism sort of embedded in our mind, this idea that lighter skin is the key to a better, happier life. And clearly, 100%, the color of your skin has nothing to do with that, you know? But can
Yeah.
we talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, Tell me, what element do you want me to, go into that? Because there's so much that it's so heavy, and in a good way. I mean, it's loaded, and there's heaps that we could cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea, I've heard you talk about um, colonialism being seeded into our mind, and you have to reprogram your mind. I think that's the
Mm,
thing. Like, somewhere you were able to deprogram your mind,
yeah,
and maybe you couldn't pinpoint that moment, but
I do
now
have
on
a
the
moment.
outside, yeah.
I
Oh, let's
actually do
go
have a
then.
moment. I do have a moment because
Do
you've
it.
just unlocked a bit of a memory. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just thought, oh my God, no,
No,
I remember
no,
the
let's
moment where I
go.
was like, hang on. So I actually worked in the beauty industry. And this was many years ago. I was interning at the time that I think I was just completing my master's degree. Even though I was doing HR, I thought that my dream job was to work in the beauty industry. And the only position they had available was a marketing intern. So I did that. And I remember that they were ordering in foundations, and I was talking to one of the brand managers, and we were getting so excited for the launch. I worked on this launch, I worked on the influencer briefs. And when I looked at the shades they were ordering, they stopped at shades that were lighter than me. And let me start by saying I'm a light skinned woman of color. So if I can't find my shade, what about the people who are more marginalized and further down the spectrum? And I remember asking the brand manager, okay, so do you know when you'd be getting my shade in? Because I'd love to try it. And I was told, well, we won't be getting in darker shades because Australia is not really the market for it. And this was a luxury beauty brand that is telling me that people of color are not the people with buying power, or the market for this brand. And I remember it did not sit well with me for a while. And I didn't really find my voice on the issue till maybe about a year or so later, when I was working as a professional makeup artist. I had finished my qualification, I got a job in makeup retail, and I didn't have makeup for my skin or my clients who were darker skinned. And that's when I started thinking, this is not Australia. Australia is not just this segment. Why are we not catering to us? And when you unpack the thinking, it is post colonial ideas about what Australian is, and that is Anglo Celtic perceptions. So the real Australia, in all its rich, true, authentic diversity, was not being fully seen. And I think when I started working in the industry and I was privy to those conversations, that's when, the wheels were turning, like I said. And I thought, this isn't it. So when I started doing my work on social media, I was vocal about it. And that's how I built community. And then I guess the rest of my career story is history. And now I'm in a position where I can speak to it globally. But it it started with being in a meeting room as an intern and being told, you aren't really the market for luxury makeup.
Now you are representing an entire country and probably the whole planet Earth. And I think that that is so, so amazing. So let's
Yeah.
get back to Miss Universe for a minute.
Yeah.
How do you get into this idea that I am going to sign up for a pageant? Like, how does one become Miss Universe?
Yeah. It's really funny. It's not something I've always liked Miss Universe. I love the glamour of it, never really looked into it because I used to have misperceptions about it as well. Back in a different era when it was owned by different management. And I thought, okay, there is a bit of an emphasis on the physical side of things. I don't really fit that mold, being one, 5'3", two, a woman of color in Australia. And I think I'd only seen, Australian representatives who were more, they had more Eurocentric features. So I never even entertained it. But I guess over the last few years, what I had been doing was building a social following that was committed to a platform. So even though I was doing beauty content, fashion content, I was also speaking, and I was making sure that everything was channeling that message of diversity and inclusion. So I remember seeing Miss Universe Australia 2019, Priya Sorrell, who is actually an Indian Australian lawyer. And she
Wow.
worked in my building. We worked in the same government building. So that's how I first started paying attention to Miss Universe Australia, because one day we both had to do a fire drill and we saw each other down in the base of the building. And I remember messaging her saying, "Hey, you look familiar. Do you work in this building?" She said yes. And then upon following her Instagram, I realized, oh my gosh, this girl is a finalist for Miss Universe Australia. And when
Wow.
she won, and I saw a woman who looked like me, who was also different because she was a lawyer, like she had, the career as well, and she was a different ethnic background. I thought, oh my God, I maybe I could do it. And I thought about doing it because I thought if I had that platform, my work would reach so many more people. So I remember in April 2019, I was at an event. This is a very serendipitous story. I was invited to an event. It was this haute couture designer. He was showcasing his work after being invited to Paris Fashion Week. And I just started out blogging. I was really excited. I took my best friend, Shannon, and it was that night. It was the first time I'd said out loud to anybody, "Shannon, I think I'm going to apply to Miss Universe Australia." And like, sort of like, just waiting for the reaction. And she said to me, "Maria, I believe you can do anything you put your mind to." And that was
What
it. I knew,
a
I'm like, I'm
good
going to do it.
front.
Yeah. And
When you
knowing I
win,
didn't. So,
you
but
need to
get
send her a
this.
bottle of champagne.
I know. And then get this. So that particular designer, I ended up writing a blog post about him because I was so touched by his story. He himself is an immigrant to the country. He had moved here. Him and his family had come here as refugees, and they started from scratch. They had a really, it was not an easy start to life in Australia. And then he worked hard, and through sacrifice and a strong work ethic, he built this incredible brand. And he represented Australia at Paris Fashion Week, the first Melbourne designer. So when it came to thinking about who I wanted to design my evening gown, I decided to just give it a go, take a risk. And I said to the Miss Australia team, please reach out to this particular designer. And now Ellen Lacal has designed my custom haute couture evening gown. And the story is so beautiful because it was at his show that I first decided I would do it. And I was looking at his beautiful, beautiful pieces that I then actually wore in a photo shoot to promote our partnership that is centered on representing Black, Indigenous, and people of color on an international stage as valued Australians. So
you willed it into existence. It's amazing. I love that story. When you talk about Priya, this is why I love doing the show, because I really believe, and I've been saying this from the beginning, you cannot be it till you see it.
You see it.
But now,
that's it.
yes. But now that I'm doing episode 31 with you, I've been having this other thought. Maybe it's not enough to just see it, but you have to be brave enough to walk into that. And I think that part of your story is you didn't just get this idea, but like you started taking the steps and doing the hard work and having the courage to be brave enough to step into what you wanted to be.
And I'll tell you, Alex, those words really mean a lot to me. I'm 19 days away from the competition, and I'm very often reminded that this is very different, what I'm doing, my representation, because for many reasons, I've had to break a few ceilings to be here. I'm not the first woman of color representing Australia, but to be 5'3" and challenging that norm in an industry where you see a certain mold of beauty represented and you don't see diversity in those sorts of things. And to this day, I have been, I've incurred a lot of racism where people have said, she doesn't look Australian. How can she represent Australia? She's got no Australian heritage. A lack of understanding of what being Australian really is. But also then, what a wonderful woman. She's so strong, but she's only 5'3". How's she going to compete with other women? So for you to say to be brave enough to do it, I've had to really dig deep to find that strength in myself to say, you know what? I'm going to go into this knowing that if I do this right, I am showing women and people of color that it is not your exterior qualities that determines how beautiful, powerful, worthy, or capable you are. And it is really important for me to show up and not just, I'm here, I'm taking a risk, I'm going to show up fearlessly, because I know what this means if I do it right. So I
I
appreciate that you
mean,
said that.
it's true. I think we can all feel that, but where is it coming from? Because
Yeah.
someone says something about me, people, I don't like, I don't really have that many haters. Maybe I do. I don't know. I think I ignore them. I put myself in this bubble where I just like, it was
Maybe
such a
I
journey.
do.
It's
Yeah.
like a journey to get to a point where you literally don't care about the opinion. You don't let them inform you in a negative way, I think
Yeah.
is the right way to say that. I mean, and it sounds like it was a journey for you too. And now you're entering the stratosphere where, I mean, it's there. So what advice or what's your coping mechanism to deal with, frankly, it's bullying. How do you deal
Yeah.
with that?
It hasn't been easy. I think I'm a pretty resilient person, and prior to doing any of this and being really in the public eye, I didn't I didn't get this a lot. And where I would see a troll here or there, I just need to block and delete and not internalize it. But particularly in the lead up to the competition, there are people who, no matter what you do and who you are, sometimes there are people that might be, something about you might trigger something in them that is, it leads them to project their own insecurities, and people can be unkind and hateful. And when it's been happening a little bit more, and in I've been seeing it a little bit more. I'm not going to lie, I'm human, and it's important to acknowledge that we all feel it, and I feel it, and it's been tough. But I think for me, what has helped me, it's a few things. One, having an exceptional support network. My
Yeah.
friends and my family and my team, they breathe faith, love, and confidence into me. And anytime I am feeling vulnerable, I'll just go straight to them, and they remind me of why I can rise above it. But it's also, it helps to have the perspective of the fact that you are getting racism and you are being judged based on something as superficial as height. That there is your why. That is why you're here, and that is why you need to do this, because this is happening. So if that wasn't happening to me, then, I don't need to do what I'm doing. But I'm here for a reason. And it is about celebrating differences, appreciating differences, and showing women, people of color, and anyone who's been told they're less than, that they are not. And despite what they've been told, they can shatter the ceiling. So it's a bigger picture. There's a bigger why, and there's a bigger purpose that I'm doing this. And I've been reminding myself of that to push through. And I know that a lot of people are looking to my example and how I'm responding, online in the digital space when I have been met with these things. So I want to set a really good example, because I don't think you can counter hate with more hate. And I think when you respond with nothing but compassion and love, it diffuses the situation completely. And I think it's a beautiful example to be able to set. And I know I'm healed in here enough that I can do that. So
You know,
that's,
we recently had on the show Niran Chaudhary, who's a CEO of Panera, which is a
mm,
huge bakery cafe chain here in North America, and I think maybe a few other
yeah.
countries. And he talked about how when things got really tough, he sort of
Mm,
uses the analogy of a windmill. So you harness the wind and turn
yeah.
it into like this powerful windmill versus going into a bunker. And hearing you say that, I think, Maria, that's exactly what you've been doing. And, I think the journey of getting to a place where the opinions of others don't really influence how we feel about ourselves is exactly that. It's like a journey, right? We have to
It
make
is.
sure we get to the place where that inner voice, this roommate of ours, is kinder to us more than anyone. People, I'm still on that journey. We all are. But,
We all are.
yes, we all are. But
Yeah.
to see you handle these comments and these situations with so much grace is super inspiring. And I think I'm so with you. Focus on the good. And I mean, without a doubt, there are so many people rooting for you. And whatever the outcome is, although people, I already know what the outcome is, you are going to have the crown either way. But whatever the outcome is, like you're such a beacon already of like light
Oh,
and
thank you.
power. And you know what's so interesting, Maria, is I feel like females tend to secede, defer our power. And this idea of like dimming our light to make other people come.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that, I have to say, it took me till 30 to actually articulate that to myself that I no
Yeah.
longer want to be in situations where I'm dimming my light. I want to be in a
To
situation where
appease other people.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Like just people,
Yeah.
I got to put my whole self out and they just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly like, how have you felt like that you've gotten to that place where you are shining bright and not letting
Yeah.
others do?
Yes, and I think it's a couple of things. One, I used to not even be able to take a compliment. People would,
Yeah.
people would give you a compliment, and I don't know how many of you listening would resonate with this, but I would always respond with a self-deprecating comment in like a comical way. But if someone compliments you, like for example, oh, you look great today, and I'm like, oh my God, no, I look terrible. Look at this, and I would slip into this pattern of putting myself down instead of being able to say thank you. I spent a little extra time in the mirror today. I really appreciate that. And I think it's that thing that I told you where in society, women are told, be confident, but not too confident. If you are happy within yourself and you're not, insecure, maybe you're perceived as being, oh, she's full of herself. This is a remark that I have heard from many people over the course of I'll tell you specifically who. I have heard this from men that I have respectfully said to them, where they've expressed interest very recently, in fact, expressed interest. And I said, look, thank you, but no, thank you. I'm not actually interested. And I've stopped making fake excuses for not being interested. I said, this is it. I don't need to justify myself. And then it's met with, you must be really full of yourself, or, things like that. And when I unpack what that is, we are conditioning women to be disempowered and to not be able to back themselves and speak their mind and say what they think. And I think I want us to normalize being able to say, yeah, I'm proud of myself. I did this well. I like this about myself. No, I don't want to explain myself. Things like that. At the start, you mentioned, I think one thing that I used to do is I used to be shy about talking about things that I was proud of and things I'd worked hard for. For example, university and graduating with first class honors and getting nominated to Harvard. And if people would talk about it, I'd say, no, let's not talk about that. Let's not. Why can't we celebrate the things about ourselves that we are proud of and that means something to us? Why does there have to be this conditional narrative to make other people comfortable? Again, I'm very big on living and letting live. And I think, we should all be appreciative of differences, our unique paths, and not put women down and confuse them with mixed messages about what to say, what not to say, and how to present themselves in society.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this exact thing the other day, and I I kind of feel like it's it's a privilege to be able to, let's call it brag, if that's what we have to say to
I mean,
normalize
I,
that
I
word.
don't I don't even want to. I mean, people say humble brag or whatever, but I think
Yes, but
sometimes
it's
it's
not.
just it's not a brag. Sometimes you are quite literally just telling people about something you've done, and you're expressing pride in that. And I think if
Well,
you
men
had a best
have
friend,
more of a privilege to say that though. And I think women need to harness
yes,
that privilege. And I
yes,
think that's the point I'm really trying to make is that,
yeah.
we haven't had the privilege to be able to say and shine our light as bright. And now is sort of that time to take that back and
Mm.
normalize that.
Do you know what it is though? And I remember you've just said something that sparked a point or something I'd written about once in an interesting piece. But I talked about how men, relative to women and non-binary people and transgender people, I think it's important to recognize that, rightly or wrongly, we live in a society that is structured in such a way that people who do identify as male have been privileged. And I think they have the privilege of having years and years and years and generations of representation in leadership, in business, in politics, in media, and doing all these things. Whereas other gender identities, like, people who identify as women, non-binary, or transgender people, they don't have that. So, for example, we're talking about, for example, women not having that kind of representation. When you do now come out and you talk about things that you're proud of, or you talk about things that you've done or that are unconventional, because it hasn't been seen, and it wasn't the norm for as long as it was for men, it can be uncomfortable for people because you are challenging their ideas, antiquated ideas and norms about what it is to belong to a certain gender. And I think that's for that reason when women are assertive, it's, oh, you're bitchy. Because in the narrative for so long has been women should be subservient. You belong in a certain context. You have a certain role. So when we're seeing women rise up and just, this is my life. I don't care what anyone thinks. This is what I'm doing. It's challenging these antiquated gender ideas. And that's why people get uncomfortable. But that's why it's important to address it and to normalize people of alternative gender identities, not only taking up space, but doing it proudly and therefore creating space for other people. I think that's really important.
100%. I could not agree more. You have this incredible work ethic. I love that about you. And here's the thing that I really want to know, because consistency is so much harder when no one's clapping for you. And you did all of this before you were known, before you had this platform, in a pandemic. Like, how did you stay the course?
Yeah. And let's go beyond the pandemic, because what a lot of people don't know is, so whilst I was doing my master's degree back in, I'm going to say 2015 and 2016, I was doing that full time, and I was doing a makeup qualification on the side and working retail. So I had no days off. And I remember thinking, my goodness, it was really tough to balance uni and work. So to then fit in the makeup qualification, it was very tough. But very early on, I realized there is a lot to be gained from sacrifice and work ethic. And I thought, I love this, just stick it out and make it happen. And in that period, I learned to juggle my time, to manage my time. And I remember speaking to an ex's friend. He was in marketing. And I remember telling him, I have this vision where, yes, I'm doing makeup and it's starting to grow a bit of a community, but I want to talk about leadership. I want to talk about diversity and inclusion. And I remember him telling me, that's not what you should do. Let me tell you what you should do. Stick with makeup, grow your following with makeup. And then once you've got a big following, talk about what you want. And in essence, he completely shut down everything that I said and told me what I should and shouldn't do. And I can tell you now, it made me want to do the complete opposite. And I thought, just you watch. So I started weaving in the messages that I cared about. I would come home from uni, and before anyone even sent me products for free, I would go and buy products from brands that I wanted to work with and be aligned with. And I would come home and I would schedule it in my diary as if it was a formal work deliverable and say, okay, I've got content creation to do from 6 till 8, and this post is going to go live on this day. And again, I willed it into existence because I treated it like a job before it was a job, because there was a bigger why behind it. And I think if you've got a really solid purpose and sense of why you're doing something, you will persevere when it gets tough. So as it evolved and I followed the breadcrumbs and different opportunities came up, even in a pandemic, it was really hard. But the bigger purpose and knowing, what, this could mean something significant, and it could be historic and life-changing for an entire generation if I do this right. It's why I continue to hustle. And I think I just love it though. I really like, for many years I was told, you don't fit this industry. You shouldn't do that. Be quiet and follow the normal course. With Miss Universe Australia, even, it's, maybe don't expect too much. I just love thinking I'm not going to be defined by what other people tell me to expect. And I wanted to work for it and prove it. And I think when you've got a solid intention, you align it with action and work ethic, and the energy is good, things manifest. And I know that because I'm sitting here talking to you, about to go to Miss Universe. This is going to be published on your show in Forbes, and it is not something I could have necessarily conceived of a year ago. But when you work hard and you back it with the intention, I do believe things happen.
I couldn't agree more. And, speaking of manifesting and setting intentions, so many of the leaders we've had on this show talk about meditating, about doing a vision board, about journaling, painting a vivid future for themselves. What do you do? Like, what's your ritual?
I consider myself a very spiritual person, an intuitive woman, and I do have these practices too. When we go into CEO Binge Club, I'll tell you the book that changed it all for me. That is one of my all-time favorite books. Changed my life.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay. All right. Well, I I really do believe, people are on different journeys, and I grew up in a very religious household. My dad used to be a Catholic priest. So he left priesthood for my mum. But when they moved to Australia, I went to church every Sunday. I sang in the church choir. It was a family church choir. Like I followed the rules, but I was also, I guess, introduced to religion in a way where I was told, this is what we believe in, this is right and wrong. And there was no room for questioning. And I think I understand that that was the context that my parents grew up in, and it was a different time. But for me, I'm definitely someone that needs to know how, and I want to ask questions, and I'm not just going to blindly accept something if it doesn't ring true for me. So in my 20s, I actually completely distanced myself from religion, but but in my gut somewhere, I knew that I believed in something bigger, but I was too afraid to even entertain the idea. I was just so resistant that I was just like, I'm averse to even opening myself up to any of this. But I believe in following the whispers in your life. And I remember I was starting to feel like I would be getting messages about feeling like I was in the right place, in the wrong place, and just feeling guided. And I was on a trip in 2019, right before the pandemic. And I remember I was traveling Europe with my ex, and I would wake up every morning at 6:30 to go for a run before the rest of the little local towns had woken up. And I was running around Sorrento in Italy, and I came across this church, and it was open. And I don't know why, but I just felt compelled to go in. And I don't think I've told anyone the story, but I remember I went in and I just cried. And it's the craziest thing, because it was almost like suddenly I was willing to accept that I felt connected to something bigger, and I was going through something in my personal life that I needed answers for, and it was almost just like a spiritual surrender. And when I got back, I started to be a lot more open to those messages, and I had a number of life changes. And within that year, I ended up participating in Miss Universe Australia, winning, changing my job, and following this path and becoming so attuned to these messages. So now I'm very open and respectful and still on a journey, but things that I do involve journaling, and I write out things that I want, but not in a way that I want this because that creates a gap. I write about it as if it happened. So, for example, in May last year, I knew that the Miss Universe finals were going to be in October 2020. I wrote a check to myself as the winner, and I wrote to Maria Thattil, Miss Universe Australia, for the amount of money that the winner got as a business or education grant, and I dated it October 2020, and it came true. And I would meditate on this, and I wrote a countdown saying 6 weeks till I'm crowned Miss Universe Australia, and I would meditate on it. And I remember one particular meditation where my entire body, by the end of I was reflecting on it, thinking on it, my whole body felt like it was like just every fiber of my being, I could feel it. And I just knew, I'm like, oh my God, like, I think this is going to happen. And against all odds, right? And, so meditating, journaling. And this year, for example, I'd written a number of goals. I'd written a savings financial goal. I had written, I want to have a magazine cover in 2021, like things that would have seemed crazy, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write it down. A number of those things have come true already, far sooner than I could have ever imagined. So I believe writing it and believing you're worthy of it, and like you already have it, and then putting the work behind it, I think that makes it happen. I do affirmations in the morning. I am affirmations, because I think the way you speak to yourself is so powerful. So I'll start the day by saying, I am powerful, worthy, co-creating my own reality with a bigger power than myself. Things like that. I'm healthy. I'm grateful for my loved ones being healthy, and it's small little practices like that it does make a difference, and it makes me feel connected to something bigger. And I know I'm getting messages that I'm where I'm meant to be, and that something big is going to happen. I know it, and I feel it in every fiber of my being, because I'm open to those messages and I'm receiving them. So it's hard to explain, but
What is the name of that church?
Sign me up, pastor, priest, please. And no one was there. I was just there by myself, and and I think these moments where you have your breakthrough, or suddenly you're open, it happens in different ways for different people. And I've listened to many stories from many different people from all walks of life. But I think you've got to be ready for it, and you cannot teach someone to be open. You cannot tell them how to be open. I think it is an energetic thing that has to come from your heart. And, you know, when I was ready, I was ready. I could have read all the right books, but I had to be at that point in my life. And I think as well, for anyone who's listening, if you're struggling with your career or with your own faith or spirituality or relationships, I really think that if you are looking for the gift in a situation and being intentional, you can choose to perceive this as being a very important part of your story. And then it will be, because that's how you're choosing to see it. So everything that has led me up to this point, whilst a lot of it has been hard and some of it continues to be hard, I think it is preparing me for the role of a lifetime. And I could not be worthy of going for something like Miss Universe had I not lived each and every single thing I have lived. So yeah, it's just amazing to reflect on it. And I get full body goosebumps talking about it, but it really is a special thing.
So your book suggestion is write your own story, and I
Well, I'll tell you the book. There was a book that I read in lockdown that did help me with a lot of my thinking, helped me from a mental health perspective, but also helped me from a spiritual perspective, because it's helping me rise above worldly challenges. So yes, my book suggestion is write your own narrative, but if you could read anything, please read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I know so many people talk about it, but it was incredibly powerful and impactful in that it helped me to shift my perspective in how I perceived circumstances, people, situations, or facets of my social identity. And it really explains how you are so much bigger than your ego, and how to harness that power to rise above your ego and thrive and be happy in the simplicity of your life. It's a wonderful book. It's an incredible book.
It's a great suggestion. It's a great one. It's one that I think I keep coming back to. And every time I do, I just feel like I go deeper into it, or I understand it so much more. So that is a great, great suggestion. You are packing. Are you packed up? Are you ready to go? What's left? Like, you were like one of the aliens on the planet now who gets to leave their home.
I know, I feel so special. I've got an exemption to travel. So I'm gonna go to the airport and be like, whole pass, please let me through. No, I leave in 3 days. I've got 5 suitcases. I've packed one with all I'm a very type A organized person. So I'd written my packing list a couple of weeks ago. I knew exactly what I wanted, what packing cubes were going to contain what. I've got a COVID kit, I've got medication, like everything, band-aids for your heels and foot gels and all those little bits and pieces, but then skincare, makeup and things. What is not packed is my wardrobe. So I'm working with a stylist, and I didn't want to go too overboard. I know I need a lot of outfits, but we've styled outfits very intentionally because they represent different things to me. So I guess by now you will have seen some of my wardrobe and the messages behind it. But like I said, everything's intentional. So I just need to pack that up in a suitcase, pack up my couture gown and my other gown I'm wearing for the preliminary competition. And I can tell you my main gown takes up 1 suitcase. The entire
that
thing.
National costume. There's a cute little Insta story you did where you're laying on top of it. It is bigger than you. You know what my question was? Is how is she going to get that to Florida? So explain it to me. How is it
getting there? Been couriered. It's actually been couriered directly to Miami. So after I did
like tracking it like a crazy person.
Yeah, like the team are tracking it. Immediately after I did that segment, they ended up sending it over. So it'll be there when I arrive. But I could stack about 12 of me in that box. It's a huge box. It's custom made. The wings are phenomenal, but it needs a lot of space so that things don't knock around and get damaged. So it's a very big box. Thank goodness I'm not having to take that myself, because I don't know how I would, but I have got 5 suitcases, and I cannot take a team because Australian travel regulations are very different here. I think we're doing really well in terms of COVID, so people can't come and go freely. But that being said, I think I'll be okay because one, I'm a hustler. I've got it. I've like, I've been through some very challenging times over the past couple of months where, for example, I had 4 days of straight shooting, 30 hours of shooting. One of the days was 16 hours. I had to drive 7 hours myself, 3 hours of outfit changes and climbing into waterfalls, the beach and forests. And it was just day after day, 5:30 a.m. wake ups, long days. And I remember thinking to myself, just get through, it'll be worth it. And after doing that, I'm like, I can do anything because that was tough. So it's 10 days of events in the lead up to the competition. Normally, apparently the women go there for a full month of shoots and events and things like that. So it's only 10 days. It'll come and go. So I'm going to go there, give it everything and do my best.
You've already made some friends with some of the other pageant contestants. Yes, some good friendships.
Yeah. And I think that's what people don't realize. It's, I think the fans in Miss Universe, it is huge. It is. And I didn't realize that. It's like a sports in Australia, which is really big. Miss Universe is a big deal.
Videos on your odds and you are favored to win.
And that in itself is just, people see it, and it's so wonderful to think that people believe in you. But it is very crazy because some people can get very passionate and don't understand that you can support the women you love without tearing other women down. So it's crazy. The women, the delegates, we actually have a group chat where we all talk to each other, and there are maybe 10 or 11 women that I have separate private group chats with. We send each other voice clips. We send each other videos of our day, just checking in. When some of them have struggled to find a visa, we're checking in. What can we do? Can we help you? Are you okay? And they don't realize, yes, it's a competition and everybody wants to make their countries proud, but we're not trying to win at the expense of other women, because that's not actually winning. You want to come out with it, uplifting these other women because they are your sisters. And one of you, it's your destiny to become Miss Universe. It is somebody's destiny and it's written. And for the rest, it's an important journey. And you are going to make friends around the world. And I'm so excited to meet these women. I remember just thinking yesterday, I had gone to PT, came back to my phone. There were a few voice messages from a few of them. And I thought, I can't wait to see these people in real life. And I'm so lucky that I get to. So yeah, I'm excited.
I so believe that when the tide rises, all the ships rise. And so I love that you said that. And I'm also very glad that I'm not the only friend that's sending you voice messages and little voice recordings.
I love voice recordings. They're my favorite way to connect with people.
Yes. How can people connect with you?
Well, if you want to follow my journey, there are a couple of different ways. I have a website, I have my Instagram, but I also have a YouTube channel where I like to share, and a TikTok. But again, all my socials, they're very different content. TikTok is a little bit more silly. YouTube is more taking you behind the scenes of all these, really nice things I'm privileged to do. Instagram is all encompassing, and my website is work. So find me on any of there. I love meeting new friends and adding them to the community. And I'm so excited to connect with your viewers. So excited.
Yeah. I heard you once say that what you're going through right now doesn't define your future. And I think, those words bear a lot of power because a lot of people are in a tough situation. Let's talk about that for a quick minute before we sort of wrap up. Like, what advice do you have?
Yeah. I think and that is something that means so much to me, because when I'm asked what is the biggest life lesson that I have, it is exactly that. And I think of the fact that I grew up as a daughter of immigrants in a Western context where diversity was not necessarily celebrated. And I did internalize racism and sexism and misogyny and unkindness and all kinds of discrimination beyond just that. And when I think back to that girl who thought her prospects were limited, who did not have enough people around her, who didn't have the visibility of figures to show her that she could do better. If she could be this now, I know it is living proof that your past and your hardships do not define your future. And that is something that I want to drive home to absolutely everybody, irrespective of your traumas. I believe that being open can connect you to the right people and the right resources. And, you don't even have to worry about that. But I think when you've got an open heart and you're intentional, the universe is a funny way of bringing the right people into your life. I, for
Yeah.
example, when I started as Miss Universe Australia, when I was just elected, I only had my family and friends helping me with content, filming it in my streets, in my home, and my agency. But I didn't have photographers, videographers, stylists, nothing. I knew nothing of that. Somehow along the way, these people just popped up into my life, and they're good people. They've become my friends. And I think being open and believing I am not limited by what is happening right now, it is powerful. So I want people to know that. I want them to know that it can get better. And we're living in an age where there's been a digital revolution. We've got so much more at our fingertips. And that is a privileged thing to say, in that there are people in different contexts who do not have access to the same technology and things like that. But that is why those of us with the privilege need to do this work to make it better for those people. And I'm saying this as someone who, it's very, very passionate about it. It's make space as yourself, because that creates space for other people. So I really believe that.
There's so much wisdom locked up in the stories that we never tell.
Yeah.
And so by sharing our stories, I mean, we collectively rise. And for you to be so honest and brave and authentic to share your story, not just to us that know you, but on such a big platform, you really are such the definition of true beauty for me and so many others. So thank you for going around and planting seeds in people's minds and helping them look at themselves in a different way, because you've really done that for me. And I mean, as evidenced by our first phone call and the thoughts I've been having about what beauty means, someone who just turned 40, who's trying to reinvent herself. And I think so many people are always constantly reinventing. So thank you, Maria. Miss
Well, that's what it is.
Universe.
It's Miss Beauty is in the differences, Alex. That's what it is. And I think beauty is there is no mold physically for what you represent, your value. And I think that's a really, really important thing that I believe that I want to drive home. True beauty is celebrating your differences.
It's your soul print. And with that, my friend, Miss Universe, it's a wrap.
Oh my God, I got tingles when you said that. Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate this opportunity. And I'm so grateful to talk to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful.